Why do art teachers hate anime? Why do adults in your life look down on your reading of manga and just wish that you would read Huck Finn or Beowulf like a normal kid? Greetings, my name is Zach, and I'm an art teacher. I taught middle and high school art for over a decade in the American public schools, and I love anime, though I am more partial to manga, if I'm being honest. As you might gather from this, I was not the teacher who hated anime, but I certainly worked alongside them and experienced them throughout my own time in high school and at art school. So why do art teachers hate anime? Where does this stereotypical behavior come from? First of all, I will likely use the terms manga and anime interchangeably in this video, as we are referring to the drawing form of the media. Yes, manga is the drawn comic form and anime is the animated version, but anime is what most people not in the know refer to both as. So keep in mind that I know the distinction, but we'll be switching back and forth, as applicable, and to keep myself from going crazy. There are a plethora of reasons that art teachers look down upon their students drawing anime characters. Some of these reasons have legitimate components to them, and some are based on radically outdated concepts of art. This is nothing new to the art world. In fact, most of what we now call art history is an overreaction to the movement that came prior. Let's start with some of the bad reasons art teachers despise your anime art. It flies in the face of what they learned and know. Many of your art teachers grew up without anime, and their teachers could not have fathomed the art form. Rejection comes naturally to something outside of your knowledge. It is not a great aspect of humanity, but our shared history has shown time and time again that humans often oppose that which they do not understand. The other is often judged harshly and thrown out without a second glance. Most of your art teachers went to college or university to become art teachers. This is true for the US, so please remember that is where my knowledge and experience comes from. In the classes that you take for your art education degree, you are run through the basics of art history, drawing, painting, sculpture, ceramics, and a few other art forms. You learn broadly what makes each of those art forms what they are today. You don't have the time to go too in-depth, as you have so many art forms to cover in just a few years. The reason for this is simple. An elementary art teacher often teaches all of the art media, so if they spent their time specializing in any particular medium, they would be far less capable of instructing the other ones. In that somewhat rushed education, there is little time for the nuance of specific drawing styles, anatomical studies, or the development of personal style. These things, though incredibly important, often don't find a place in the art education structure, and thusly are not included. If you are lucky, some of the education classes and childhood psychology courses will break down some of the individual and developmental needs of kids to establish things of their own media loves, their own styles, and very importantly, their own and distinct opinions. So your art teacher might be pushing against your anime art simply because it flies in the face of what they learned. They don't have a place for it, and so it must be detrimental to their students. Maybe they just don't understand it. Piggybacking on the educational components of becoming an art teacher, it may just not fit into their predefined notion of what art is. This is likely linked to the "don't draw anime, it isn't real art" phrase that gets tossed around so nonchalantly it makes me want to vomit. If your art teacher spent as many hours in art history classes as I did, they could easily come out with a very understandably secure understanding of what art is, and by proxy, what art isn't. And when I say secure, I mean secure in their own contemplation and thought of what it is, not that it actually is a secure, defined, perfect definition of art. When you go through several thousand examples of pieces of art, have to memorize their dates, artists, periods, and media just to regurgitate them for an exam, it can be pretty easy to think you have it figured out. But by its very nature, art history has to look backward and can only include so much. Anime is not going to show up in most art history classes, because most of them cover time periods where it simply did not exist. You have to get into the post-impressionistic painting era and the influx of Japanese media into Europe in the late 1800s to start finding the first seeds of anime and manga in our Western art world. Those pieces are small at that point, and unless you have a very thorough art history professor, you are not going to see the legitimacy of anime and its links to modern art in any meaningful way. So maybe your art teacher just doesn't have a place to put it in their mind. Anime is outside what they know as art, and therefore it cannot be art. A beautiful false dichotomy appears, and from it, a stubborn and stagnant position is born that divides the art room into camps ready to wage war on one another, in a space that was designed to foster divergence and creativity. Some art teachers hate anime because they think it is too easy to create. In research for this script, I even ran into an art teacher writing about how once you have learned to draw a few anime bodies, you've got it down since they are all basically the same. My mind instantly shot to One Piece, my favorite manga, and the radically diverse kinds of bodies that the series author Ichiro Oda conjures out of his bizarre headspace. They are all the same? Goodness, what ignorance. Are some anime series full of characters that all look similar? Sure, anime is not a monolith though. It is not a single thing. It is a fully fleshed out, diverse, and immense art form. Is it easier to create than other art though? Well, let's take a look and compare it to its Western equivalent, comic book art. It's funny how we see so many "my art teacher hates anime" videos and comments, and so few "my art teacher hates my drawing of Hulk." I'm sure it happens, but I think there's a little bit of Western trumps Eastern art coming into play here. So is anime or manga easier to draw than Marvel or DC characters? Some of the work is a little more simplified, for sure, but simplified hardly means easier. It is easier to make something look realistic or read correctly if you have a glut of extra lines and shading available to you. It requires a large quantity of knowledge and understanding to adequately simplify something. I am not sure I would go so far as to say that drawing anime-style characters is decidedly harder than Western characters, but I am comfortable putting them on the same tier of difficulty and art prowess. They are further mirrored by the awesome amount of variance in both art forms. If you look at the divergence of Batman from Billy and Mandy, of Winnie the Pooh to Arcane, you cannot assert that Western animation is a homogeneous form. Likewise, asserting that all anime is the same, that once you have drawn one, you have drawn them all, is markedly absurd and ignorant. Anime is not just Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. It is a massive and broad art form. I would be remiss if I did not mention the following, however. Art teachers sometimes oppose anime for legitimate and justifiable reasons. This does not mean harping on you for drawing a particular way, insulting your taste in art, or demeaning you as amateurish for enjoying anime is ever justifiable. But aside from those negative sorts of things, you could and might have an art teacher that softly leads you away from anime, for some, at the very least, well-meaning reasons. Let's take a look at some of these for a moment. They want you to focus on the basics so that whatever you pursue, it will look better. I have heard this a lot, and often from a well-meaning teacher, even if it was preceded by something more condescending. There is truth to this statement, and in fact, you hear it from many of the creators on this art form whose art styles are decidedly cartoon or anime-like in appearance. Creators like Mark Brunet or Trent Kaniga will point new artists back to the basics of value, light, color, even though their personal art styles are very stylized. And these two are not in the minority. Understanding the art fundamentals will help whatever art form you pursue, even if your end goal is to work primarily on heavily stylized anime-esque characters. Learning the anatomy of figures will help you understand why your favorite artist makes the decisions they make, why they start the hairline in a particular place, or why they simplify hands that way. And the little secret is that finding your individual artistic style is often done by returning to the fundamentals and working toward the thing that you love. This is where you have the opportunity to break things down in a new way, to solve an issue in a way that only you, from your very unique and interesting perspective, can. So straying from anime and focusing on the fundamentals can actually help your anime drawings look better in the end. Here is the tip from an art teacher. Don't forget why you got into it in the first place. Don't focus all your time on the fundamentals and forget to draw the things that you enjoy, the things that make the hard work worth it. Work on the fundamentals, but also work on your own stuff too. I've often heard art teachers say, if you learn from only a single style, you can find yourself locked in. Again, there is some latent wisdom in this. If you learn how to draw in a highly stylized way, then it can be difficult to learn other things, and you may resort to shouting, "It's just my style," when someone asks why you made certain decisions, or why you can't draw a head that matches anything we see in reality. The duality here is interesting though. Do you want to be able to draw other things, to be a professional, to grow in your craft? Or do you just want to draw things you like because it makes you happy? It's hard to land on any reasonable place that asserts that even your hobby and happiness should be beholden to some artistic 10 commandments. So if your goal with art is simply to enjoy yourself, just keep doing you. If, however, your goal is to spread out, to work professionally, or to simply grow, then yes, I would agree with this art teacher point. Don't stay in just one lane. Branch out, try other things, and don't marry yourself to an art style early on. Like I mentioned earlier though, don't stray so far from what got you in the first place, or you might lose your way. You might lose your joy. Here is another point, specifically on copying anime characters. Creating from imagination requires an understanding of the subject matter prior to stylization. Can you learn to draw anime-style characters by just copying anime and manga? Yes. Is it the most efficient way? I don't think so. If you want to be able to create from memory, to fabricate new characters, new poses, new scenes, then branching out and working on something other than copying will be greatly to your benefit. I've come to the annoying realization lately that working from reference and copying doesn't help with skill building nearly as much as I had thought for the last 20 years. There is a difference between copying and mindfully working from reference. The issue with just copying is that you may find yourself simply getting really good at transferring something from one page to another. If this is your whole goal, great, checkbox done, bravo! If you want to create new things though, working from reference has to be done differently. You have to know what you don't know and work on filling in those gaps. In this way, copying anime won't help you, but referencing anime in various forms will. Instead of copying a character, you can work from several different drawings and figure out how the artists solve issues concerning the shoulders and the torso and the connection points, and work on your own articulation of those facts into your work. I copied a ton of anime when I was in middle and high school. I loved Dragon Ball Z, and I copied loads of characters. I did not learn a lot about how to create my own until I started trying to draw from imagination. And those drawings were terrible. It took many attempts and references back to Akira Toriyama's work to figure out how to solve some basic problems. And only then did my work start to look like I intended. It still wasn't good, I was young after all, but it looked much better. I want to take a look at some of the big overarching issues with all of this discussion though, before we close out this video. At the core of this entire discussion, there are some fundamental issues. Anime is often reduced to simply an art style. To any of you that love the medium, I don't have to take a ton of time to tell you that anime is far more broad than simply being an art style. There is an anime of every genre, for every variable and distinct individual out there. The shonen genre, which is likely the most understood here in the West, is often a classic hero's journey, with a main protagonist who overcomes terrifying odds to save their world. But even in this tiny little portion of the art form, you have an art style, character development, storytelling, world building, foreshadowing, composition, and every other component necessary to creating a beautiful story. To reduce anime down to being a stylistic choice alone is simply being ignorant to the art form. You don't have to like it, but it seems inane to undervalue it or to disregard it as being juvenile or simply cartoons for kids. And this might be a huge reason why it is disregarded in the United States. People here have a predisposition to think of all things animated as having been designed for kids. Cartoons are what little kids watch on Saturday mornings. Cartoons are for the nose-picking elementary students, and anime is just the amped-up version for edgy teenagers. This sentiment is so massively pervasive to the American culture that it must be a huge component of why so many people have that art teacher in their lives. It is an understandable, but no less agitating ignorance. It takes a few moments of humility and a desire to learn and adjust to recognize that different cultures and countries have different art forms that can all find their legitimate place among the stars. But the most catastrophic component of all of this, the fact that makes my skin crawl, is how damaging a few words from a teacher can be for a student. Teachers are an authority figure in the life of students, often gaining and bearing significant levels of trust, and a flippant remark from one can have nasty, damaging, and far-reaching effects. People in positions of authority have to be cautious about what they say, what they imply, and how they speak. I wish I could tell you that I was always cautious with what I said and how I acted as a teacher, but unfortunately, I am human and made stupid decisions sometimes. I learned to be more cautious and to speak more slowly the older and more experienced I became. Teachers are just human too. But for better or worse, they are humans that help direct and guide the youth of tomorrow along their paths. So if your teacher condemns your art because it is too anime, because the people you draw have eyes that are too big or hair in bizarre, weird colors, remember that they are just one human in your life. There may be some nuggets of well-meaning goodness in their words, and there may be nothing but anger and resentment towards a future they wish they had, or something they simply do not understand. This art teacher loves anime, knows it is a legitimate art form, and still enjoys it to this very day. Keep pursuing your art, whatever it is, and find people that will encourage you along the journey, and try to disconnect from the detractors. So have a good one, y'all. Watch anime. See you soon.